Welcome, everybody, to the Level Up Podcast. Hello, hello. I am your co-host, John Arms, with Erik Thurwanger, who's also
right.
co-host. We're equal co-hosts. We're co-hosting. It's like we're
An equal co.
co-parenting this Level Up Podcast child.
We are.
We're
Yeah.
equal. We're equal on that. It is our mission. It is our duty. It's our honor to help every business that we come across, and we help them level up. That's why we call it the Level Up Podcast.
That's right.
And so today we're going to talk about this little thing called change. It happens. It's a thing. It happens. And to do so, we brought in a change expert, Leilani Bloomquist. Hello, Leilani. I'm going to do a little intro of who you are and what I know about you.
Fantastic.
You can correct me if I'm wrong. Leilani is a digital transformation advisor. She's a speaker, change agent, human-centered design practitioner, and fractional transformation leader. Oh my God, that's a mouthful. You do a lot. That's amazing.
It's a lot.
And there's more, and we're going to get into more. So, but welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to open up this conversation with the two of you today.
Oh my gosh. Change.
Well, there's no better time for leveling up than right now.
Yes, exactly.
There absolutely isn't. Okay, so the way we do this, we're going to talk about a lot of questions, and we try to do a little speed round at the end, awesome. All that kind of stuff. But since we decided to talk about change today, I kind of want to start there. Change. You study this stuff. You study stuff. Erik studies leadership. He's a nerd about leadership. I study fractional marketing. I'm a nerd about that. And I'm not going to say you're a nerd, but change is your jam. And when I think about change, I'm like, since COVID, change is like, it's like on cocaine. It's just coming at us so fast and all that. Can you ground us in the reality of change today since COVID? Like, it's different, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. COVID challenged corporate America like nothing that we've seen in ages, right? Like if you think about something that was just hugely disruptive, yes, there was also just a global episode, right, that we're all co-experiencing. But within the corporate world itself, change was a pretty steady and predictable pace, right, about what normal corporations and organizations could take on. There was some really fantastic research done by the Chief Martech group that actually in the first year of the pandemic, especially those first 6 to 9 months, that we experienced 10 years worth of corporate change just within less than a year. And so the whole thing of like people feeling absolutely exhausted, right? Like change is hard. You're building new muscles. You're creating new ways of working, new dynamics in relationships, sometimes reporting structures, functional areas, really challenging the status quo on processes and how long those processes need to take, right? And then on top of that, having all of what was normally known as current working structures and dynamics, mostly, butts and seats, also challenged, where then leaders also had to evolve the way that they were leading, right? Because they couldn't physically see their staff. And for a lot of leaders, that played into the change as well. And although we might have had some ebbs and flows around just the speed of change since the first year of the pandemic, it's definitely not slowing down overall. And AI, of course, is the next big, great example as people are wrapping their hands around AI and what that means and how to use it, how quickly it's evolving. And so it's no longer, I would say, about just change management. Change agility is really the necessary focus for leaders in particular, because leaders have to then model it for their teams and help educate and bring them along. But I think we're going to be hearing a lot more around change agility because it's no longer going to go back to a pace that it was even pre-pandemic. So how do you build those muscles and change the culture and become more agile around change and how you approach it and what's needed to have those conversations?
Erik has a graphic. So Erik and I do a lot of stuff together, and he and I, we were doing we do a lot of stuff together, and we're helping people through these issues. And Erik, I think it was at Small Business Revolution, and or Main Street Revolution, and Eric's like, well, here's what it looks like. Three little graphics, right? And it just, I think it put the visual to what we're all dealing with, Eric.
I think you have to. I think the let's say the biggest problem is if they were all small, but the biggest problem of the whole pandemic is leaders were not prepared for chaos. They just had there was no training, development, or preparation. So leaders just went into it. And now those that have been developed as leaders, they fared so much better than those that were winging it.
Yeah.
But it's just like anything. There's three phases of anything chaotic, right? There's the obstacle when it first hits. That's at
chaos.
During the first 6 to 9 months, and I would even say, from a obstacle standpoint, it was with us much longer. But there's the great obstacle, then there's the transition out of it, and then there's the great new era, which we are now. And I think that people really had to learn how to adapt quickly. Even Gallup said 62% of the workforce went remote in 40 days. And again, it's like in the military. If you go on a deployment, you're preparing for deployment. Nobody's prepared for these things, and I think that when it comes to change, it just scares people so much.
Mm-hmm.
And the faster it comes, the scarier it is, unless you have a leadership approach to it. I think that it just frightens people. And look, we're going to be in a big year of change. 2024, it's an election year, and it's a repeat of the worst election year ever.
Yeah.
With the same two guys back.
All that craziness.
Yeah. So there's a lot of anxiety right now. That's why this is such a great topic, because people have to learn how to navigate through all of these things coming. And now is the time. Yeah.
Leilani, you use this term, change agility, which seems like grasp that, because if you don't have that, it ain't going to be good. Right. Can you talk more about that?
Yeah. So change agility, one, I think starts as a mindset shift, right? And so when we think about certain leadership styles, right, and certain organizations, they can be much more bureaucratic and like top down and like more heavy handed in that. There's organizations that I think are likely set up for more success with change agility. And those are the ones that are more mature in the product-led operating model, because they've already pushed a lot of the right size decision making further down in the organization. And so leaders aren't having to make every decision in those types of organizations, right? They have correct decision making throughout the organization. But change agility is a big mindset shift where instead of when ideas and opportunities start to bubble up, there's the resistance of like, nope, we're not, right? It's a no. It's more around the where and the how does that fit in, right? And AI is just a key example of this. There's really not an organization that's going to not be impacted by AI. It's just a matter of like the how and the when and the where. So how do you start to build frameworks as leaders that allow you to still be laser focused on your key priorities and key goals for the year, and also open up a dialogue and be open to opportunities as technology and advancements and things continue to bubble up. And so it is a little bit of that mindset shift where it's a yes and, right? Like, let's give clarity and focus, especially in like volatile election years, right? Where people want clarity and other people are being rightfully so very judicious and thoughtful stewards of their corporate dollars, right? Because there is some just friction that's going to happen this year because of the election. And how do you continue to open up the dialogue and be open to areas of opportunity, and what structures can you put in place within your organization, within your leadership teams to have those dialogues? Because you might find that there's opportunities to pivot, to lean into testing or to some pilot programs, right? As new technology and changes continue to come at you. So I think that mindset shift of the yes and, right? Versus it's a yes or a no, right? It's not an or, it's an and is the one shift. And then there are some processes that you can put in place and some structures within leadership within teams, even the way that you approach and connect with stakeholders, right? That allow some of that flexibility within your planning as well. And that's where you kind of start to lean in some of that change agility. and also start to create a culture where you're welcoming ideas and opportunities to come forward in thoughtful manners, right, from across the organization.
Yeah, I think that the you bring up a good topic on AI because it's not going away.
No.
It's only going to grow. And you think about 20 years ago, so many people saying, well, the dot-com era it's just a fad.
Right.
That'll go away. This whole internet thing, it's not going to be that big. I even want to say that the CEO of Blockbuster said that in regard to purchasing Netflix, that he said something about the dot, if he could go back in time, right?
Yep.
So that was a huge mistake. I'm a big believer in, yes, I think that the idea of things changing rapidly is here, and it's here to stay for a long time. I think a lot of it comes down to, and you hit the nail on the head, it's leaders creating a culture, and also I think leaders creating a dialogue about this word. I think that people, I have some thoughts on the word. I've taught on the word for a long time. You can't be a leadership coach and not mention the word change.
Yeah.
I feel, I'm going to throw this out there.
Yeah.
I feel that change is very much like the word diet. I think that it turns people off, even though it's good for them. So you have to give them a new word.
Oh.
And so when you think about going on a diet, what they've shifted the word to, because words are empowering, is this is a lifestyle. It's not a diet, it's a lifestyle. Either way, your food is changing. So I'm of the mindset that here's how I help leaders. I always say, change nothing, enhance everything. Be careful of how you present it because it's scary to people. And we've been hit with change in the last 4 years, rapid fire. I mean, every time we took a breath, we got hit with another change.
Right.
And I always roll it out in my company with my clients. I always say, we're not changing anything, we're enhancing it, we're making it better. And so a lot of it is, I think, the acceptance of there's a better way to phrase things. Just like, I'm not on a diet. No way. I've incorporated eating habits into my lifestyle, And so, but it used to be that diets were the thing. What's that?
I'm on a fitness journey.
I'm on a fitness journey, right?
That feels better than diet, doesn't it?
It does sound better than diet, even though, like, if after you go on vacation, you got to come back and go on a diet, but you hate the words. You're like, all right, I got to really get on this fitness journey for the next week. Right. But I think a lot of it, I think that most organizations struggle on change because it's not delivered the right way. I think they have subpar delivery. They're not empowering their people, and they're not creating a culture, like you said, where people are embracing the things that are coming, and they really need to. Getting people engaged and unified it's one of our primary roles as a leader. And we can't ignore the fact that some things are going to change. So they really have to embrace the delivery of it.
Leadership and dialogue and culture. So I'm going to talk about a couple of asteroids here. So here's some asteroids that hit Earth. In 2020, COVID hit us. Boom, right? And then it created a new norm. Through 2021 and now, remote, boom, hit the workforce, and now it's a new norm. 2024 AI, boom, another asteroid. Like we're just getting smacked, right? But it's ironic to me, Leilani, in that, and I want to talk about digital here for a second, because digital transformation, like the oldest asteroid in this thing is fucking digital. like digital transformation is, I'm not going to say old hat because it's like new shit, right? We can swear on this podcast all we want. So we do that. So isn't that funny? Like, oh my God, digital's like, it's the new, it's the front, it's all that. And then boom, asteroid, we get hit. So I want to help our audience learn a little bit about you here, because you talk about a digital transformation journey. That's your thing. And when I think of that, I think website, I think CRM, I think e-commerce, Salesforce. It is so big. I don't know if I'm going to ask you to break it down or simplify it, but like for people thinking about digital transformation, put us in that place. Where should our head be?
So the first thing that I would say is, when it comes to transformation programs, everything needs to be on the table. It is truly looking broadly across the organization. I would also say that it's not just public facing. So and I want to be clear about that in particular, because sometimes people only look at the public facing. And the way that I work with leaders is I work directly with the C-suite and senior leaders of companies.
Mhm.
One, to clearly define what is their digital strategy. And
Mhm.
then as I'm working with them to look at their transformation roadmap and their priorities, we really take a holistic approach to look broadly, both internally, externally, making sure that we're bringing the voice of the customer front and center and understanding what are those moments that build and break trust. And by
Mhm.
the way, customers are also internal. You can have
For
some
sure.
massive investments internally that create huge operational efficiencies, that save costs, that drive employee engagement, that assist in employee retention, right? And so I think of customers very broadly
Mm.
in that sense as well.
That's healthy.
And generally speaking, there's always a data component, there's always a security and compliance component, there's always a technology component. And it's really about aligning sales and marketing and IT and data and HR and finance, right? To really holistically look at where are the foundational investments that need to be made year over year to build towards, which is the goal for almost every company and leadership team, right? What do you need to put into place to build the muscles and the foundation and have
Yeah.
the data and the tools in place to eventually get to a place of innovation?
Mhm.
Now, I will also say that the hardest part of any digital transformation is the cultural transformation,
Ah, do
because
tell.
the work that happens, technology is just simply our enabler, which is why I talk about the fact that I'm technology agnostic, because we may find that in those early years, your data is so disparate and dirty that like the first investments might be in an MDM, right? Master data management. You need to get cleaned up data, a unified view of the customer, do some other things because you can't even really look outside of that, right? Just based on like
Mhm.
data. And from a cultural perspective, it's being really intentional about breaking down those silos so you don't have senior leaders planning in silos without talking to one
Yeah.
another, without aligning the priorities and the sequencing of investments based on one another's goals, which is the enterprise company goals, right?
Mhm. Mhm.
And there's still so many organizations and leadership teams that do their planning in a matter of a day or two. Each leader comes with a budget and an ask, and they say, this is what's approved. But they haven't actually come together and talked
Yeah.
through that and planned and looked at what needs to be true and what are the key dependencies to move any of those priorities forward,
Yeah.
right? Which plays into sequencing.
Yeah.
And that's a cultural transformation.
Well,
Like that's a cultural shift.
let me ask you this. So I do a lot on the strategic planning, more or less the overall plan for a company.
Yeah.
And I'll ask a question. I'll say, well, Leilani, how on a scale of 1 to 10, how important is it for a business to have a strategic plan that maps out the next 5 years? And they all say it's a 10. And then I'll say, can I see your plan? And 95% say, no, we don't have one. So it's very interesting that they rank something so high. What are you finding on the digital transformation as far as people having a solid digital plan? Are you finding something similar to where John and I are going into organizations and they don't have a plan for the things they think are very important? Are you finding the same thing and then you're helping them create that plan? Do they already have a plan in place, or is the digital transformation something that is newer to them of creating a plan for that?
Yeah. A lot of the organizations that I work with, leaders are having what I call more of the popcorn effect, where they have all of these ideas and opportunities kind of, coming at them quickly,
Mhm.
and they're unsure of where to start. And
Okay.
so I do think that it begins with most companies that I start with don't have a digital strategy,
Yeah.
don't have a really clear strategic plan. Oftentimes, they're newer into having really clearly defined metrics and goals that are shared goals across teams and organizations, going back to the
Mm.
we can't
Mhm.
work in a silo anymore.
Yeah.
Um, and so, working with them to get really clear, they might have a goal that they want to double in size every 5 years.
Yeah.
But then it's okay, well, what needs to be true
That's right.
deliver on that. And so it's
Yeah.
backing into the what needs to be true and how
Mhm.
can we start to layer on those thoughtful investments. And that's why it's so critical to look at the people, process, and technology, because again, technology is the enabler. But if
Yeah.
you are missing key skill sets or functional areas or operating models, right? Like you can invest in whatever technology you want, and you're not going to have what you need to actually continue to grow and evolve and sustain it.
Yeah. It's almost like when I talk to people about their marketing plan. So if I do an overall plan, and then if they don't have a marketing plan, I got to get John involved, right? But I think that sometimes people confuse doing marketing things with having a marketing plan, or doing digital things and I've got a digital plan, or I'm doing some sales things that must be our sales plan.
Yeah.
So I think people see the big picture on it. But what I was going to ask you is, one thing that I find interesting is, especially as technology is our enabler, and
Mhm.
that it goes with sales too, right? That there's so many tools now for sales. Are you seeing a disconnect generationally in the workplace when it comes to the digital outlook?
Um, yes and no, and I'll give you more clarity around that. Sometimes there's actually a bigger disconnect based on the industry or vertical.
Hmm.
So the way that, so for instance, if we think about like manufacturing and distribution in that space,
Yeah,
think about like the contractors of the world, there's a lot of ways of working that are very still human to human, right? And so
yes,
some of
yeah,
those things are also means all of their notes and ideas are in their brain, and the
yeah.
teams are working on pads of paper that are sitting in their home offices with the teams dispersed across
Hmm.
geographic areas and locations.
Mhm.
Um, and other times it can be also generational. So I think it's a yes and.
Yeah,
Um, there are some people that are older that are super tech savvy and still are curious and want to like understand the latest tech. Just by the nature of default, younger generations coming through who have
yeah,
grown up with tech, right, are
yeah,
generally much more comfortable and confident with
Mhm.
them. But I think sometimes you can have a lot of influence based on the vertical or industry that you're working
yeah.
within, in addition to the generations. And
But
so
what a
it's,
great way to increase engagement for leaders to utilize the
Mhm.
insights of younger generations, right? You know, you want people to be more engaged, more empowered, and here's
Yeah.
something they're much more natural at than many generations. Get them engaged in some ideas or some of the sessions with you.
Yeah. Which kind of brings up the idea of change champions. And so when I work with organizations, the goal is to find those early adopters and the people that are excited by change, right? There's a natural bell
Yeah.
curve of
Mhm.
change, right? People really excited, people kind of in the middle, and then you
Hmm.
have, the hesitant individuals at the other end
Yeah.
who are more of like the wait and see.
Hmm.
And the most beneficial way to drive change within an organization is actually have a cross-functional group working with you to define
On
the
change.
processes, the change, even the
Yeah.
training approaches, communication,
Yeah.
to reinforce it individually. They also have fantastic insights that like you
For
may not
sure.
know as a leader or consultant coming in as
Yeah.
well.
Yeah. You I love this word that you use, and I want to dig into it a little bit. I've seen you say it in some of your videos, and you said it today. What needs to be true?
Yeah.
And that just rings a little bell in my ear because Eric just said it. Like a lot of people are like, "What needs to be done?"
Yeah.
Different. Talk more about your approach. What needs to be true? What do you mean by that? And what
Yeah.
path does that put people on versus what needs to be done? And let's go run to it as fast as we can. What needs to be true? I love that.
Yeah.
And I'm going to steal it, by the way. I'm going to totally steal it.
Oh, please, it's not mine. So I will tell you, I had worked for a VP years ago, early in my people leadership career, and she was brilliant. And when I would approach her with a problem, and I was like, I'm really struggling with this, her response would be, what needs to be true to move this forward? And I loved that framing because it puts it in such a positive and
Mm-hmm.
like empowering light of
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
what do we need, right? And the what needs to be true, I actually use that oftentimes in my workshops with leaders
Okay.
as well,
Yeah.
because it allows us to be really thoughtful around, do we need data? Do we not have a technology tool or platform? Do we not have resources? Do our resources just not have the skill sets?
Mm-hmm.
Mm.
Is it a capacity? Is it a funding, right? The what needs to be true, I think, is a fantastic framing because it's all encompassing. It's not just looking at, I need this new digital tool, right? Like,
Mm-hmm.
and so when we think about like the human centered design process, right, we're anchoring to what problem are we trying to solve
Mm-hmm.
versus coming in with a solution, right? Versus saying, I need
Yeah.
this, purple widget that's 4 by 4. We're saying This is the problem we're
Oh
trying to
my God.
solve. And what are the
Yeah.
options on how we can actually solve this, right? Because we might be able to solve this with tools and tech that we already have. We just don't have the budget or the resources or the knowledge,
Mhm.
right, to invest in that. And so
Yeah.
the what needs to be true allows it to frame it up and then have really thoughtful conversations as a leadership team around how can we then solve for that,
It
right?
creates such a great environment for contemplation and thought and dialogue. And if you address it that way, I'll give you guys an example. I was doing some consulting last year with a company, and the company comes from tech. And
Mhm.
one thing I've realized about companies from tech is they love their toys. Love their toys. And that company had no less than 5 different CRMs that they were using because they're fascinated by them. Like, oh,
Yeah.
here's this one and that one, and they can talk to each other, and it just, all the wires could cross and all that stuff, and that's sort of a what needs to be done or could be done, but it's like has nothing to do with what needs to be true. What need to be true would be how can we simplify our machinery?
That's right.
Mhm. Right.
Well,
How do
I
you
gotta. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry, Lane.
Oh, no, I was just gonna say, how do you create a true golden record, right? Or a true unified view of the customer
Yeah,
while driving operational efficiency would be a perfect what needs to be true, right? And then you can
yeah.
look at like, why are we paying for 5 enterprise tools?
I need a what needs to be true workshop. This is real, and Eric's got thoughts on this too.
Well,
Yeah,
I
well, I mean, look, I mean, think about those 5 CRMs. That's like having too many subscriptions to these pluses, right? I mean, well, I like this one show, so I have Paramount Plus, and I got Disney Plus, and then you got $5,000 a month in pluses.
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
Listening to you, Leilani, I have to think that the people listening right now are thinking that they need a digital transformation, even if they're not 100% sure what it is. Just listening to you makes them want to explore things. So I really have 2 questions for you.
Mhm.
And I know John has a bunch, so we may have to schedule a part 2 on this. But how do you help people have a digital transformation? What does that process look like? If somebody says, I need to call her, we need a digital transformation, they say, hey, how does this work?
Yeah.
How do you help them have that transformation?
Yeah. I always like to start off with what I call a discovery period. So the first 90 days in working with a new leadership team and new company, it's the first thing I do is one-on-one interviews and listening sessions across the organization, ideally with customers and some key strategic partners as well, as I'm really getting a deep understanding of what is their current state, what are some of their pain points. That also gives a lot of insights into the overall digital maturity and some
Yeah,
of the change agility as well, those conversations and insights. And then it also bubbles up some really common and core themes. Throughout that process, right, there's also what I call a 2 half-day ideation workshop where we have the opportunity to bring together a really diverse cross-functional group of leaders and key resources across the company and think really big and broad around a unified problem
yeah,
statement. And if companies are immature, we can actually create some illustrative stories of what that future state could look like, right? If they need some examples to fire up the imagination.
yeah,
And it's really about using some of those human centered design processes to think big and broad without constraints and leaving any constraints to like current state. And then we do some voting exercises, right? And
mm,
then day 2 is really looking at what needs to be true and what are the key dependencies for those top priorities. Out of that always comes thoughtful conversations with the senior leadership team around here's what we're hearing from overall themes and
yeah,
opportunities that allows us to then co-create their strategy, right? And or any key pillars or key enablers, I call them, that
yeah,
really are some of those core elements to support their strategy and priorities, and then working with that leadership team. And
mm,
it can look like maybe what we've found is they don't have the right strategic agency partners, right? And they need some support in really finding new partnerships, or they need to hire some key resources and need some support in
yeah,
hiring some key resources or building out or training. There's also opportunities to bring in thought leaders as leaders are really trying to mature in different spaces.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have a really fantastic network of leaders and experts in different areas that I've even brought into different steercos that can like help them understand what good looks like in some of these different spaces, whether it's around data strategy and governance, or whether it's around the product-led operating model, et cetera. And so the 90 days, it goes quickly, but it's amazing how much work and clarity and focus we can co-create together in those 90 days. So that's generally where I start with leaders and with companies when we're just kicking off some transformation efforts.
I think the 90-day approach is huge. In fact, all of my books talk about 90 days, 90 days, 90 days. And I know there's a lot of research to show that people can stay focused for about 90 days or 12 weeks. And then they need to decompress a little bit. Because Marine Corps boot camp was 90 days and they send you home, which you really need to go home after that. But it's interesting because even the Marine Corps doesn't keep you longer than 90 days, give or take a day or two, because that's the magic number there. So I love hearing that, because I think people can take that kind of a quarterly approach, and it's a lot to accomplish, but they can break it down into those 90-day smaller bites.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. Question on, you have brought up and you gravitate to this wonderful term, human-centered, often.
Yeah.
And which I love, because every time I call a customer service, there's no flipping human, right? It's inhumane, and it's sort of the opposite about human-centered. And I think about those that I know that are looking for a job, for example, and using technology for that. And what I keep hearing is like, this is not just a bad experience, it's inhumane. Like, it's literally hurting my soul, and I never talk to anybody. And, it's just so human-centered seems to be maybe something we're missing. Talk a little bit about the human-centered approach, where we are with it as a society, and how you plan on fixing all those problems in the world.
in 90 days.
In 90 days. Yeah.
Figure out cloning really quickly first and foremost. Human-centered in its simplest form is keeping those that we serve at the forefront of everything that we're doing. And so when we are looking at what we're trying to create from a customer experience, we need to talk to our customers. Like, we need to interview them. We need to empathize with them. We need to connect with them. We need to understand, as they're going through that customer journey, what are those moments that build and break trust, and how are we showing up, right? Like, are they frustrated 90% of the time working with us? Because if so, we've got some work to do. And I would say that's just as important when you think about your employees as well. I've heard of call centers where the reps are trying to do really thoughtful work and answer hard problems for their customers, and they have 17 different technology stacks and programs that they have to log in and sort through to try and answer questions. And so when you think about that customer experience, both for the external and internal customer, and how painful that is, there's a reason why those teams have high turnover. There's a reason why it's hard to train them. There's a reason why your different customer engagement scores might be going down, not because the customer rep is poor at their job, but because they're not set up well to be successful.
Oh my gosh.
And that's frustrating from both sides. And so when you think about the opportunities, you may not be able to solve every single one of those, but that customer lens of being really customer, not only focused, but obsessed, and really wanting to continue to deepen the relationship and empathize, right? Like, not every engagement is going to be sexy and fun in a lot of industries. Let's just be candid, right? There's moments that are just really like healthcare, right? Normally people aren't super excited to call a health insurance rep, but how can we empathize and connect with them and make it as simple and as streamlined as possible so we can be at least efficient, right? Because removing friction is also just as important as like a surprise and delight, which you're going to find in more like the Starbucks brands and Target, right? Versus like health insurance or insurance overall. And so it's really, I think empathy is at the core of that, of really understanding what we're creating for our customers and being intentional about what do we want to create for our customers, because there's generally a delta there. And within that delta, it allows you to be thoughtful of your investments, which then allows you to deepen your customer relationships, deepen your trust, which is deepening share of wallet as well, right? And so
Mhm.
there's just a benefit all the way through that.
You know,
So,
go ahead,
oh, go
Eric.
ahead, John.
All right,
Well, I was
that's
going to
fine.
say, as three consultants consulting in different spaces, there's a lot of things that could constitute a win for all of us, whether it's leading, planning, marketing, digital transformation, all of these things. There's, obviously clients bringing us back in. That's always a big win. But
Yeah.
is there a win that stands out for you? Like when you've done a phenomenal job, when you've delivered the experience that you need to for your customers and they've experienced a digital transformation, is there feedback you get that you're like, this is the win, not just a monetary transaction or even a referral? Like those are great, but is there a win that you really strive for at the highest level?
Yeah. I think one of the best compliments and things that I love to do and see is generally when I'm doing my job really well, I work myself out of a job, which means I've helped leadership
Yeah,
mature, helped support them in bringing in the right agency partners and employees, right, to continue to
yeah,
build on the work that we've done together. And I love seeing them continue to win and evolve from the sidelines. And so I tend to stay connected with
that's
my
huge.
customers. And it's so fantastic when I see them
Yeah,
hitting all of their milestones and continuing to do the work that we started off together doing. Um, and in a lot of ways, like I just feel so proud because I
yeah,
know that the work that we did together is going to continue to grow and expand within their organization. And there's nothing better. And of course, the testimonials and referrals are always, a huge
yeah,
compliment
Mhm.
as well. But I get just as excited to cheer
that's
my
awesome.
clients on from the sidelines when they continue to do all the things that we started together.
Yeah,
Yeah,
no, that's
I love
huge.
that.
And it takes a lot of pressure off of the clients. I think there's a lot of good consultants or coaches that they take more of a how can I continue to get back in the door approach, right? How do I get them to keep cutting a check? When you have the confidence like you do to say, hey, listen, I'm building you up to leave the nest here. That's huge. And that takes a tremendous amount of trust, empathy, like you said, keeping people at the center of everything. So I love that win. I think that's big. I think people listening right now are going to be like, I need a win like that, where that's what we're looking for, is to be able to
Yeah.
not always have a consultant as a crutch for a current break in the bone,
Mhm.
Mhm.
but they can also tap back into us when they want to grow in other directions. But to be able to let them leave the nest, I think is huge.
Oh,
Yeah.
for sure, for
You
sure.
know?
You know, we're speaking about human centered, right? And
Mhm.
I think a lot of economists would argue. In my book, I know I argue this. There it is over my shoulder. I argue this as well as is.
Oh,
Oh
there it
God,
is.
thank you, thank you, thank you. I
My
appreciate
copy
that.
is upstairs, John.
No, it's okay.
I
Don't
have
run
it.
and get it. You can get it after the
Yeah.
show.
Yeah.
But I argue this in that, like, to be human, it makes so much sense, right? Like, this is logical. We should do it this way as humans. What got us away from this? What are the factors that got us away from even thinking the obvious human centered? And I think a lot of people would argue, and economists would do, it's the quarterly reports, it's the metrics, it's the this month you need to do this mentality. And what I mean by that is, Eric and I joke about this a lot. There's salespeople, like you were talking about, Leilani, is they love their customer. They love the human. They want to solve the problems, right? They love it. They love it. And they're so good at it. And then someone's tapping them on the shoulder. I need all your data in today at this
Mhm.
very minute. We've got a meeting about your data.
Yeah.
And it's your data and it's your number and it's the date and it's the time and it's the Salesforce and it's the HubSpot and it's like the humanity leaves so fast.
Yeah.
And economists argue when you orient yourself so much towards the data, you move away from the people, and that ruins things. It only makes it good for shareholders. It doesn't make it good for the customer. All right, I'll leave it there. You guys talk about that a little bit.
Well,
Yeah, Eric, I'm curious to hear your thoughts because I have a
well,
couple responses as well. So,
so I feel that data, obviously, I think we'd all agree the right data is very important. But I feel that when we ask for data, I think that it elicits a response, which then puts the human factor back in. In other words, if I ask for reports from my team, which I do, and I do nothing with them, I've removed any type of human contact where the report becomes just a checkbox item. And what I've found in organizations is that when a report just becomes a report and nobody's giving you feedback, there are people that will test that out and start to put bogus information in there just to see if anybody's even reading it. And then that further fuels the fire and frustrations when they put something in that they're waiting for somebody to say, this is wrong. And somebody just says, hey, thanks for the report, and never gets back. So I feel that the data is important if used properly and used with a purpose, and I think it can't become a checkbox.
I think it has to be simple too. That's one of the, especially
So simple.
with smaller businesses, right? Like getting data down to a workable feast is a job unto itself.
Use data that you're prepared to take action on. If you're not prepared to take action on it, you really have to question why you're using it.
Yeah.
When I was an air traffic controller in the Marine Corps, there was a lot of things to track, but between the air traffic controller and the pilot, there was only a few data points to track, because at the end of the day, you wanted to get the flight to take off and land safely. So you don't need an encyclopedia of data to look through. You just got to make sure that pilot, does what that pilot needs to do. So too much data could get in the way of efficiencies.
Yeah.
So or crash an airplane.
Yeah, nobody wants that. I always say the reporting comes down to facts and frequency. What facts do I need? What's the frequency I need them so I can take action? If it's too much, then I shouldn't ask for it. So I think a lot of leaders have meetings because they think they should have meetings as leaders. And I think a lot of leaders ask for reports because they think they should have reports, and they do little to nothing with both of them. That's my 2 cents.
Leilani?
Oh, this is a fun one. I love data. So I do have like a geeky data side of me. I will also say I generally love working with really strong analysts. And the best analysts and reports that I've seen were all around the storytelling of what are the insights are you drawing out of the data and what does it mean? Yeah. And so I think oftentimes what's missing is the and so what part of it, right? Like just because you have data, it's the and so what? Like what does this mean and what is the impact? And the data can be really impactful when you pair that with customer insights and customer feedback. So on like the simplest term, right? Let's do an easy like e-commerce type of thing. If you see that you have people falling off mid-registration funnel, they can't even like register and access their account and they're having issues there, the data will show you that you're having an issue, right? With that registration funnel. No, or shopping cart, whatever funnel you're looking at, right? So data can tell you, tell the product team, we have an issue here. Now, then the team and the user experience experts, right, can go in and look at what's happening there and modify and make some changes. During that break, you're also seeing likely a correlation with an increase in spike in customer service calls and complaints because people can't access their accounts. And then once the team addresses that issue in the funnel, you can watch the data to see that the metrics are moving in the right direction. You then can go back to your call center and see that the call volume for these types of calls are going down. And you can potentially even see some early, customer engagement scores and feedback coming back. And so those are all data points, right? But you have an opportunity to draw that story in and tell that story outside of just a couple of data points and elements, right? That you have on a page and a report that you're showing. And so, and then if you have a clear goal around what your strategy is, what's your CX strategy and vision statement, what is your digital strategy, you can tie back using data, that story around this is our CX vision, right? We have a customer experience vision statement. We have a digital strategy. Here's how we use data to uncover an issue, a friction point. And then this is what our team did about it. And then here's the data to prove that we're making a positive impact, which then allows people to purchase more because they can access their accounts and finish it. And so it's all data, but it's how you use it to tell a story. And I think when it's done well, it can be so impactful. And then when you can actually tie customer feedback to it, like I think it just humanizes it so much.
I think you have to take, I think there's 2 terms that stand out in the business world: detailitis and analysis paralysis. And I think I always look at it like this. I try and take the complex and make it simple for people. And I always say, just ask for the data you're going to take action on. It's like going to the doctor. If they do an X-ray, a CT scan, an MRI, and then don't talk to you about it, something is weird. like,
Right.
why did you do it in the first place? Do you have any data in there? Like, what can you do for me? You're looking at these things, or if they never look at them, that's bad. Or if they just keep staring at it, at some point, it's like, take action. Like, tell me what's
Mhm.
wrong. Tell me how to fix things. I think that just, I think that the business sector as a whole, there's so many areas they need to move away from the checkbox mentality. Like,
We
put
got into that.
purpose to it.
Yep.
That's
Yeah.
why I like what you said, Leilani, about, is it true? Because that gives purpose. The business sector, there's so many leaders that are void of purpose. They're not purpose driven leaders. And
Mhm.
and what you're talking about gives purpose. It gives purpose to their digital transformation plan. It gives purpose to their data. And I think leaders are hungry. At least now, it's not survival mode anymore. We're in thrival mode,
Mhm.
and people want purpose.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think that's huge for people. They're ready to sink their teeth in. But a few years ago, people were just like, "Is this ever going to be over?" And now
Yeah.
they're like, "All right, I can get through this." And with the right tactics, like you're saying,
Yeah.
it gives them something to clamp onto.
Well, and what do you sink your teeth into, right? We just got hit by 4 asteroids in the last 4 years that we talked about. What do
Big.
you? Everything blew up. What am I sinking my teeth into? And these things, leading and planning and
Yeah.
transformation, is kind of what you have to do. Okay, question for you. Um, the
Leilani's been hit with so many
Oh
question
my God, you're
asteroids
just an
today.
amazing guest. You're helping our listeners so
Boom,
well.
boom, boom,
It's
boom, boom.
so I, as you all know, I have a soft spot and a passion spot for the small and mid market businesses.
Yeah.
90% of the companies in the United States have less than 100 people. So small matters, right? That's 50% of our GDP.
Yeah.
And this is when politicians, which it's an election year, when they get up on stage, they're not talking about, these are who they're talking about: the backbone, the middle. It's the manufacturing company in
Yeah.
Zimmerman, Minnesota. It's
Yeah.
the small retailer in Stillwell. It is that they'll talk about that, right?
Mhm.
Unfortunately, then they kind of go away and go back to serving their corporate
Right.
gods. But anyway, that's a different discussion. The the question I have for you is that I think it's all of our jobs to this segment matters. How do we make this transformation and change and all of this simpler, better, more digestible for the smalls, the
Yeah.
mid markets, those that have less resources?
Yeah.
Yeah. Good question.
That is a good question. And honestly, John, I think you might enjoy this answer, but that's honestly where tapping into a consultant or a fractional
Hmm.
resource is honestly one of the most impactful ways that they can make thoughtful progress and right sized progress for the organization, because it doesn't make sense for most mid sized companies to bring in the McKinseys and the Deloittes and the Accentures. Not that
Mhm.
they're not fantastic organizations, they're also just not right sized for a
Yeah.
lot of these organizations. But so many of these organizations are at these really critical inflection points around what they did to get to this point is not going to be what makes them successful to double and triple in size, right? And
Yeah.
continue to grow. And there's this very, very specific and intrinsic pressure right now to be much more efficient with the resources that you
Mhm.
have. And generally, how that happens is defining systems, processes, and driving and identifying organizational efficiencies. And that's
Mhm.
oftentimes tied to digitization, right? Like, how can you
Mhm.
use processes better? And with those size companies, it can be really impactful to work with them, one, on a part-time fractional interim consulting type of basis, right? There's a lot of options out there on how to format this type of engagement, because they generally don't have an entire team that can do this full time, right? They
Right.
have to use their resources, and there's always opportunities for
Mm.
thoughtful investments, refinement of strategies, right? To be much more efficient and effective. And so I always say, even if you're coming from a place of strength and growth right now,
Mhm.
there's no time like the present, and you should still be thinking about these problems to solve, even if
Yeah.
business is booming for you, because otherwise,
Absolutely.
how are you going to avoid your blockbuster moment, right?
Yeah.
it is a little bit of that always on from a leadership standpoint. And so for most midsize, that type of fractional leadership,
Mhm.
someone that can come in and look deep and broad, right, and help bring the key leaders
Mhm.
together and identify the key areas to invest in year
Yeah.
over year to really support those broader organization goals, or to get really crisp and clear on what is your strategy and what
Mhm.
are your KPIs, right? Which gives you the right
Yeah.
metrics to track, not
Right.
everything, but like the
Yeah.
right,
Right.
I think is the most impactful way for those small to, or more of those mid-size organizations to still be thinking about transformation and actually make thoughtful progress against their goals.
Mm.
I circled that answer. I do love that answer. Of course, I love that answer, and I love this size of the economy, and I want them to win. So I'm
Well,
gonna go with that. Go
okay,
ahead,
so I
Eric.
got two things. I got two things left I got to ask. I've been having two things the whole way, and then another one would come up. But well, two things on the Blockbuster. Maybe we can look into this, but
Yeah.
there was a cryptic message sent out. There's one Blockbuster left in Bend, Oregon. There's
Yeah.
one,
Yeah.
and it's there, and I believe that you can rent it out as a like a VRBO or whatever it is, and spend the night there and wax nostalgic in the 90s. I
Mhm.
really do believe that that exists. But there was a cryptic message when I was writing my last book. I was talking a little bit about that whole ordeal with Blockbuster and Netflix and what happened. And there was a message around that time that came out from Blockbuster saying something along this lines that we will rewind your movies again. So I think there's a marketing campaign. I don't know. You can look into it. John, you got to research this and find out what's going on. We will rewind your movies again, or something along those lines. So maybe Blockbuster's coming back. They're
Oh
knocked
my
down
gosh.
but not out. But the other thing, that was just some funny trivia there. But
Yeah.
the other thing, Leilani, what I get is when you're speaking, you're a very articulate speaker. You've got a tremendous amount of experience and knowledge. And as a fellow speaker, one of the highlights for me with my career is to go all over the country and share messages.
Yeah.
But I also get to listen to a lot of speakers, and not every speaker captivates me where I stay, my attention stays there. But you have captured, and I want to ask you. I know you're a speaker. If you could just talk a little bit about your speaking career, where you are with that, or the topics that you're speaking on,
Yeah.
what you would come into an organization or an association and speak on. I would love to know.
Yeah. Happy to share. Um, I am so incredibly passionate about supporting leaders, especially as they're looking at into very uncomfortable spaces that drive change.
Mhm.
And so, a lot of my focus is really around leadership and leadership development.
Yeah.
One of my talks is the lasting link for transformation, the leadership link for transformation, knowing that there is a very common stat in the transformation space that a minimum of 70% of transformation programs fail. And my point of view is there's a direct correlation between the leadership that you have in place and their skills
Mhm.
with the success of
Yeah.
transformation programs. And so being really thoughtful around leaning in and really having those conversations and being able to speak on that, I think is really impactful. And I've gotten some great feedback from giving that talk in particular,
That's great.
most recently at the Women in Leadership Conference at the University of Minnesota. On the side note, I'm also really passionate about supporting women and men. I do a lot of mentoring,
Yeah.
but really self advocacy and self promotion for women in particular, because I think
Awesome.
as a whole, many women of my generation did not grow up really learning those skill sets, the same as our male counterparts. And so there's
Mhm.
a couple different focuses that I have, but it's generally around leadership development, being much more strategic,
Yeah.
getting clear and leaning into those uncomfortable conversations, which really truly drive the cultural and leadership transformations that are
Well,
necessary.
it sounds like you'd be able to help out any person, is what I'm hearing.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned that link because I have a program, and John's a graduate of the program. I have a leadership program that we've run
Twice.
for. John's been
Nice.
through it twice. He's a coin carrying certified member. It's called the Leadership Link, and so we make the link between leading and succeeding because a lot of people don't understand it. And so I share a lot of military tactics. There,
There it
oh,
is.
there it is.
There
That
it
The
is.
works.
official challenge coin of Think Great. Yes. So
That's right.
that's our nod to the military. They have the program they use for recognition called the challenge coin.
I
But
love
yeah,
it.
we do a 12-month course on leadership where we're really guiding leaders through understanding. So many people have been in a leadership position and they don't understand the purpose. And some have been there for 30 years.
Yeah.
It's amazing when you ask a leader, how do you define leadership? And they go, well, and they don't know.
Yeah.
They've never thought in those terms of, how do I define this? What is my role as a leader? What's my purpose as a leader? Most of them just have a title. They don't know how to blaze a trail, they don't know the tools. So I love that you're doing that. I would pay to hear you speak. I think you're extremely clear in your message. I think you're very empowering. And I think your message is for everyone at all levels.
It absolutely is. So we're at 3 minutes left, so it's time for my speed round.
I love it.
Are you ready? Okay.
Speed asteroids.
Right. Yes. You can answer these as fast as slow. I'm just going to ask them fast. There's 4 questions. Okay. Speed round, close with Leilani. What are you most grateful for this year?
I would say my community is the thing that I'm most grateful for. I have had the opportunity over the years, and especially in the last, I would say 5 to 7 years, of building a really thoughtful network and supportive community, both of past and present clients, fellow entrepreneurs, and I am just really grateful for my community, and especially those entrepreneurs that I've formed even closer relationships with.
Well, hopefully they're listening and heard that. Okay, number 2, we'll send this podcast to them. They need to hear that, right? Yeah. All right. What book or video or podcast has influenced you most lately, and why?
Oh gosh. Most lately, honestly, I have been giving my brain a little bit of a break and just leaning into fiction lately for my audiobooks. However, I will say, I think some of the most impactful books that I've read that have influenced me as a leader and as a consultant are really the Brené Brown books. And I can't tell you how impactful that is, especially when we think of that very human side and how we all show up as humans with our egos, right? And with shame and all of those elements that do play into how we can both coach and mentor our teams and how we show up as leaders. And so there's so many of her books. Of course, Atlas of the Heart is one of the more recent. She has some great podcasts. Amy Cuddy is also a brilliant author who I love listening to her podcasts and books as well.
Daring greatly changed my life. So I'm with you on that. All right, number 3. What are you most excited about between now and the end of the year?
I'm most excited about additional speaking events, I think is one of the things. And then, some opportunities that I'm continuing to both work on with clients and some upcoming pitches. There's nothing more that gets me out of bed is having the opportunity to work with thoughtful leaders who are really wanting to lean into those uncomfortable spaces and figure out what needs to be true to transform their organizations. Like, this work truly gives me so much joy to be able to do. And I'm just incredibly grateful to do what I love.
That's awesome. All right, last one. If you could have dinner with, I know this is kind of a kitschy one, everybody always asks it, but I'm gonna do it anyway. If you could have dinner with any business leader or influencer that comes to mind, and it can't be me and Erik, because we'll take you to dinner either way. Who would it be and why?
I think it would be Jay Shetty.
Oh, I love that guy.
He has led such a fascinating life, and what he has done with growing a career and a business very much on purpose. I think really still grounded in a lot of the principles of his faith and what he learned as a monk, but now really kind of taking that more broadly out of that type of structure and format. I think it would just be absolutely fascinating. Yeah.
Jay Shetty, if you're listening, I will pay for dinner. I will pay for dinner, but please let me and Erik come along too. We'll just, we'll pick up the tab. But you're right. I listen to him every day, and I'm so with you on that. It's just what is his mission? To make wisdom go viral.
Right.
I love that. I love that. This has been fan-flippantastic.
Thank you so much.
Time flies when you're having fun.
It does. It does. So
thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thank you very, very much. Everybody listening, you can find Leilani on LinkedIn.
Mm-hmm.
on our
Very much.
website. Just Google. We're at the point where we say, just Google.
Just Google, but please do reach
Just
out. I'm always happy
Google.
to connect. Yeah.
Yep. We'll put links and all that, but if you Google, you'll find her. Thank you so much. We look forward to having you back. And everybody listening, we'll see you again next time at the Level Up Podcast. Goodbye.